okay? That is the question that's on the table tonight. My name is Dwayne Wiggins Jr., and welcome to this safe place, safe space where we are about to have a live discussion and check in on mental health and all that it entails on tonight. Mental illness can affect people of any age, race, or religion or income. Mental illness is a medical condition that disrupts a person's thinking, feeling, mood, and ability to relate to others and their daily functionings. Many factors contribute to the development of mental health conditions, including life experience, such as trauma or history or abuse, biological factors, family history, or mental illness. Tonight, my guests are mental health and mental well-being experts who are the specialists in the mental and well-being of others. Without further ado, I'm so excited tonight to have with me some phenomenal people who are making up this panel. First, I want to introduce to you Reverend Brandon Primos, who was born in North Philadelphia and raised in Southern California. He is an ordained minister. He's also the husband of one of our panelists tonight. He also has a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's in finance. And I love this, that Reverend Brandon, the scripture that he goes to is Jeremiah 15:19-21. And he firmly believes that accomplishment work of the cross of Jesus Christ can turn anyone's scars into stars for the kingdom of God. So I am excited tonight to have Brandon Primo with us tonight. Welcome,
Amen.
Brandon.
Amen. Good evening, my brother. Thank you so much for
So
having
Brandon,
me. I'm excited about this time.
tell us a little bit about your background as a spiritual counselor, spiritual advisor.
Wow. I have been in ministry for a little bit over 15 years now total in various capacities. But one of my deepest passions has been ministry to men specifically. My personal well being at a point was compromised, and my views completely shifted in terms of seeking out help from the counseling therapeutic community. And between the power of the Holy Spirit and some of that help, I began to transform my life. And I really seek out to do that and help men who need it in order to get to that place that the Lord wants them to be. I'm a preacher, I'm a teacher, I do a number of things, but like I say, I really do have a passion for ministering to men, especially as we are a neglected group to an extent.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm really excited that you are a part tonight. Guys, if you are hearing feedback, we will get to take care. I don't know what's causing it. Okay, we're going to still move forward. My next guest is Michelle Primos. Michelle is a minister, a Bible teacher, a speaker. She is my sister. She's the founder and visionary of the Vision of Love and Faith Ministry. Michelle is also a certified life coach and the owner of You Belong Life Coaching Services, LLC. She's the author of the High Powered Woman book, written to empower women to greater, better living and a high powered life. Michelle, thank you so much for joining me and welcome to this platform.
Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you so much for having me. It is truly an honor. Hello to everyone out there. Thanks for joining us.
Michelle, so talk to me a little bit about, I want everybody to know about all that you do, but talk to me a little bit about, the title author and the book that you just released.
I just released The High Powered Woman, and this book is a book that it shares my narrative, my story of going from brokenness to wholeness. I'm dealing with mental health issues. I start off sharing about that and how my life was transformed and changed when I began to see myself through the eyes of God, when my understanding and the truth of who I was revealed. And I'm just so grateful for the opportunity to help other people, to especially women who struggle with self-esteem, who struggle with being stuck in their lives, and to help them to come to a place of wholeness, healing, and abundant living.
I love that. Well, Michelle, thank you so much again for being a part of this panel.
Thank
My
you.
next guest is Mr. Gary Jones. He is the owner and founder of Surviving Today LLC, a private practice that specializes in providing services for individual groups and family. He is also a graduate of Temple University. Gary's a therapist, a clinical supervisor, and a licensed clinical social worker in Pennsylvania and Delaware. Gary, welcome to the panel.
Thank you, Dwayne. Welcome, everybody. It's good to be here.
Yeah, Gary, tell me a little bit about Surviving Today, your company. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Surviving Today was really formed really for the most part out of a passion, and the passion was to help people. I've been working in the mental health field for a number of years, over 20 years, and at a certain point in my life, I just felt like a calling of my life to want to be able to do more than just the normal. I wanted to be able to be part of the change. So in founding Surviving Today LLC, the whole idea was to be able to help people look at what how they can change. What is it that they need to change, and why do they want to change, and the importance of change. Reaching out to populations of people that need help, and just sort of giving a guiding hand as much as possible.
All right, awesome. Well, Gary, thank you so much and welcome to the panel. Last but certainly not least, I'm so excited to bring Anita Green to the panel. She's a native of Chester, PA. She is the founder of Grieving with Hope and the CEO and therapist of Tailor Made Behavioral Health Solutions, LLC. Anitra is committed to creating greater access to mental health services and breaking the stigma of mental health in communities of color. We are so excited, Anitra, to have you a part of the panel. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. I'm excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. This is my passion for sure.
Awesome. Anitra, well, tell me a little bit about your background and how did you begin to become passionate about mental health and mental health awareness?
1999, I finished graduate school at Pitt, and I left there on a mission to increase mental health awareness, particularly in communities of color. I've spent a great part of my life working in a variety of settings, outpatient clinics, schools. But I decided to launch my business last year in the middle of the pandemic because the need was great. And I thought that if I was ever going to do this, what better time than when mental health was at an all-time high? So I've been passionate about this since I left college, and I'm excited about all that's happening right now in platforms like this where we are spreading the word and breaking down the stigma. That is my mission.
Awesome. So, all right, I am ready to dive right into the conversation. Um, Anitra, I'll start with you because what you just said was breaking down the stigma. Can you explain to everyone that is watching what is the stigma of mental health?
The stigma is that if you have mental health, or if you say the word mental health, people think crazy. There's something, terribly wrong. And everybody has mental health. I think what we're hearing now is normalizing the fact that in the same way that everyone has health, everyone has mental health. The question is, what is the state of your mental health? Are you mentally healthy? Are you mentally unhealthy? And so I've spent a lot of time educating people and just saying, hey, we all have challenges. We all have problems. We all have been anxious or sad at some point. So there are some things that are universal when it comes to mental health. And then there is mental illness, which is different. It's a continuum. But just for people to normalize that we all have mental health.
Okay. I want to stay right here with you for a moment because you said something that I think that people really don't understand, that the difference between mental health and mental illness. You said that mental illness is continual. Can you explain that and break that down just a little bit?
Sure. So I'll start with mental health and then I'll go into mental illness. So, and I'm going to keep referencing health because I think that it allows people to better understand the analogy. So in the same way that we all have health, whether it's good health or poor health, right? There is, okay, you're not sleeping, your diet needs to change. We all have things that may be considered to be healthy or unhealthy. And then there is illness. There is things like diabetes. There's heart disease. There are actual diagnosable problems and challenges that have you labeled as having a specific illness. With mental health, you can have good mental health, poor mental health, but mental illness is actually a diagnosable challenge that is beyond the typical day-to-day norm. So whether it's schizophrenia, whether it's depression, it could be anxiety, it could be agoraphobia. There are hundreds of mental health diagnoses, but it's not a one size fits all. So there's a continuum. There's good mental health, there's fair mental health, there's poor mental health, and then there is mental illness. When you get into the mental illness, that is when people get into diagnosis. It could be genetic, the same way that we can get diabetes and heart disease. There are genetic reasons why people have mental illness. There are other risk factors that make people more likely to develop mental illness. And so, in understanding that, I think that people jumble both of those concepts up into one big thing. So
Mhm.
when you say it, when you say mental illness and you use the words interchangeably, people are like, "Oh, I don't have mental illness." Well, depression is considered to be mental illness, but you're functional and you can go to work and it doesn't look a certain way. You can't look at someone and tell what they have. And so I spend a lot of time trying to tease the two out,
Mhm.
if that makes sense.
100%. It really does. Michelle, I want to come to you and talk about, because as a life coach, I'm sure you deal with a lot of individuals that may struggle with mental health issues of, feeling motivated to want to do things or having dreams and goals that hinder them when they can't mentally, get to the place they want to get to accomplish those goals. Talk to me about those experiences. And as a life coach, what do you do? And we're going to talk about this, everyone, because I think a lot of times I remember when I put out there like, hey, I'm a certified life coach. People were like, so what's the difference between a therapist and a life coach? So I want to first start there. Let's talk about the difference between a therapist and a life coach. And then I want to talk to you about the encouragement and some of the experiences that you have had as a life coach dealing with mental health.
Wow. As a life coach, I am not a therapist. I always make this emphatically clear. I am not a therapist. A therapist is one who actually deals with a person who has a mental illness. They're able to treat them, they're trained in that particular area. As a life coach, what I do is almost you think of a football coach. I come alongside you. I evaluate where you are in your life. I see, you talk to me about your goals and your dreams and your hopes, but then also we begin to look at barriers. What are some of the obstacles, the things that are in your way? And so one of my main goals as a life coach is to help you to know who you are, to identify who you are, and to help you understand your purpose, and that you would be in a place that you could identify your goals. Now, in the midst of coaching, when I begin to ask certain questions, and I may we'll lay out a strategy, a plan for them to reach their goal. If I find after some time they can't do it, and I may begin to ask some questions. And as I ask those questions, because this is the thing, I have a natural gift, a natural counseling gift. So
Mhm.
I can discern and I can pick up when the counselor is about to move into motion and I have to refer you to a therapist. So I'll ask some questions. And if it gets to the point where I see it's deeper, the situation is deeper than what I can do, what I'm trained to do, then what I will do is refer them to a therapist. Anitra, I'm so grateful for Anitra and I are both of our relationship because she is a great resource. So I'm able to say, wait a minute, I have someone that you can talk to, someone you can trust, someone who I trust, and I have a couple other trained and licensed therapists. So when I find a client, it's deeper. They're constantly in depression, and I can identify it because I suffered with depression and anxiety. And when I see that they just cannot get out of the rut that they're in, and they begin to continue to refer back to certain things, I can pick that up and I'll say, I think that you may need a therapist. And so
Awesome.
what I would do is encourage them and I'd let them know in advance, that if I find that it may be deeper than what I can handle, I will refer you to a therapist.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I so appreciate that. That was a very clear definition. And I think that, with breaking down the stigma, I think that the most important things to think about is, Anitra, how you explained, the difference between mental illness and mental health, and Michelle, how you explained the difference between therapy and life coaching. Gary, I want to come to you and talk about this because I think a lot of times with the stigma, or what people may be facing, is that how, and this is one of the questions that was written in. Thank you all so much, and shout out to everyone who's watching tonight. Thank you all so much for submitting your questions. But Gary, I want to come to you because one of the questions that came forth is that, and if you can break this down for us, how does one, and referring to mental illness, how does one obtain mental illness? And I think Anitra kind of touched on that a little bit, but from your perspective and what you've been through and what you've seen, explain that just a little bit, please.
So the way I would explain it would be this. I think, first of all, I think we have to go back and we have to think about what mental illness is and what mental wellness is. Because I think a lot of times when we talk about it, the term illness is stigmatized. People don't want to talk about that. It leaves a nasty taste in people's mouths. But mental illness basically is any like change, any like noticeable change in your moods, in your thoughts, in your behaviors. So as Michelle and Anitra said, everyone gets depressed. Everybody gets anxious. We all go through moments where we're not feeling ourselves, and we might not be feeling ourselves for a long time, or for a minute of time. The question becomes, how long does that go? So the DSM-5, for example, has certain criteria for what would determine a particular thing to be trauma, or a certain thing to be major depressive disorder, or dysthymia, or anxiety. And we have to also understand that when we're talking about that, there's different types of depression, there's different types of anxiety. So it's not just like one little bowl that we put everything in. But mental illness in general, we're looking at a change in a person's behavior. If this person was a jovial person, happy-go-lucky person for a long time, and all of a sudden, this person is very depressed. All of a sudden, this person is not talking, or not talking much, or is withdrawing from society. They're more than likely there's what I would say major. It could be something else. If we're talking about moods of an individual with going up and going down, and we're not just having a good moment and then a not a good moment. We're talking about a moment that might be way up here, and it might be really down here, and it stays down before.
Okay.
Those are the type of things we're looking at, which basically changes in mood, thoughts, and behavior, and major changes in those areas.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And one of the things that, as I said tonight, the conversation does focus on mental health, and that's where our topic is going to be. But like I said before, I felt that it was very important. I don't know what's causing us to have that feedback. I'm so sorry. I do apologize for that. What is very important for us to understand is the difference between mental health and mental illness. So, moving this conversation forward with mental health is that, Brandon, I want to come to you and talk about mental health and how it can relate to or tie into the spiritual aspect or the religious aspect, because a lot of people did forget about that as well. In your experience, can you share with us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that, Dwayne. The Word of God, lets us know in the book of Genesis that we're created in God's image and likeness. And what that breaks down to mean is that as human beings, we are both flesh and spirit, and in God's image, we have will, intellect, and emotion. And as we go through this life, trials, tribulations, various things, those emotions can suffer damage. And it's so important that we recognize that as spirit beings, as emotional beings, there are things that we indeed do suffer from and suffer through within the context of life. It's good that we have a broad view, and we don't separate that which is spiritual from that which is, emotional or mental health related, because the two definitely correlate and do relate directly. So to ignore one and try to overemphasize another, I think has really been some of the crux of the faith community, in which we don't acknowledge those things that have harmed individuals along the way. I think it's best that when we do acknowledge both, we do employ all of our resources, and we allow the Holy Spirit of God to be our guide. In doing so, we can really come through and serve and help individuals, more effectively than we have been able to, probably in considering some of the past of the faith community when we knew a lot less about the very topic that we're talking about tonight. I think sometimes people get afraid, especially in the African American community, when we mention, issues of mental health or any type of mental acuity. And some of that has run right into the faith community, some of those same fears. But I've been blessed and fortunate to come from a background in which I've been a part of faith communities that really embrace it. I've had pastors who are also mental health professionals as well. So having the two correlate, were definitely beneficial to my faith walk and my training.
I think that is so important. Thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things that I absolutely see to be true is that we won't necessarily, and a lot of times in church, that we will preach and will teach, but we don't necessarily tell people how to survive in the world. And I think
Right.
that's really, really a big factor that lacks. That, we'll say things like pay your tithe, but we don't teach people how to be financially stable. We'll tell
Absolutely.
people to, give this and do this, but we don't teach them how to sustain. Can you speak to some of the steps that we can take to start working towards that?
Absolutely. And I hinted at it a little bit earlier in terms of resources. I think people and professionals are some of the most valuable resources that we can find. It reminds me of a passage of scripture in which a widow went to Elijah and said that she had nothing in her home in order to go ahead and pay some debts. And he asked, "What do you have?" And she said, "All I have is a little bit of oil." So it reminds me that every gift that we need is in the house of God. We have more than enough oil in order to go ahead and help and serve the individuals there. And, I think of the body of Christ as sacred, but one of the things that I also like in the body of Christ too is a think tank. I don't know if you're familiar with a think tank, but most of them are politically related, and they deal with segmented issues and how to address those issues societally with resources. I think that if, as a Christ community, we would look at the issues that impact our local and global, meaning global and local communities, and we put our resources together. There's some smart people in the body of Christ. And if we ask those people who do what they do professionally to come to the forefront and to surrender their gifts to the house, then we'll find that a lot of the help that we need in helping others, you talked about it earlier, even in terms of the finance. I know plenty of financial professionals help people get their credit together and budgeting. There's so many people who don't know how to even balance a checkbook. So I think that when we employ the resources that are already available to us as the body of Christ, then not only do we win separately, but we win together and holistically.
That that
And I
that is
asked
so true.
Dwayne,
Absolutely.
as Brandon was speaking, wow, that you said a lot of good things. And I wanted to add, in the body of Christ, oftentimes there are a lot of generalizations. And a lot of times people are dealing with some mental illnesses and they don't really understand what's going on. And they've been told that their faith is weak, and some have believed that God has turned their back on them. And there are also some who just simply believe that, their depression or what they're going through is completely a result of sin. And we understand that there is a thin line. It was some of the consequences of the things that we do that can cause and impact how we feel and our emotions and all of that. And we can feel a disconnect. But a lot of people are afraid to speak up who are believers in the Christian community or other faith communities because they feel as though they are just ostracized because of what they are going through. So I love that this platform will help to remove the stigma. And with what we were learning from Anitra and Gary, really what mental illness is and the mental health. So this is really good. And I just wanted to add that piece.
Awesome. Anitra, I want to know, can you add, I want you to add to this. A key thing that Michelle said in this was about depression. Let's start to unpack what depression looks like. When do people start experiencing depression? Like how does one get to the place of feeling depressed or being depressed?
Depression has a few origins. So it's not, it can be that you have a family history of depression. Going back to the statement that I made earlier, there are times where I do an intake with a person and I specifically ask that question. And interestingly, a lot of people don't know their mental health history, right? If I ask you, do you have a history of heart disease or cancer? But when I ask questions about mental health, people are always or often saying, I wonder. I really don't know the answer to that because we don't talk about these type of challenges. But there are people who have depression because they have a family history of depression. They have a mom that was depressed. They have clinical depression. They can trace it. Then there are people who are depressed because of situations. It could be that you've had a divorce or you've had a loss. Grief is a real big, reason that people are depressed. And as Gary said, there are certain criteria that it would take for a person to have a diagnosis for depression. Grief is not included. Depression is a stage of grief. So that would not be diagnosed. You would not be diagnosed with depression if you're grieving because you've had a recent loss. There's an expectation that depression is going to be a part of that journey. What depression looks like, it looks different, but some of the common traits, a person might notice that they are losing interest in things. So, you might be a person who was very social and loved to hang out, and now you find yourself disinterested in things that are that you used to find enjoyable. Constant crying, inability to really experience happiness, even when things are exciting. People have talked about the fact that, yes, you could give them a brand new car and it's all of this stuff happening, and they still don't necessarily feel any type of joy. A deep sense of hopelessness and helplessness. And I'm going to say that because hopelessness is different than helplessness, but people who are depressed feel both. They don't feel hope. Many times they feel hopeless and then they feel helpless. So when people say, well, all you got to do is just get up and get a job and go and I can help you, right? The energy, everything is tiring. Mm-hmm. Depression is tiring. So people oftentimes feel fatigued. There's physical symptoms for depression. Oftentimes when I hear people talking about feeling tired or sleeping a lot, excessive sleeping to escape whatever the challenge is. And unfortunately, when people don't manage their depression, other things like substance abuse, drug addictions, there's all these other things that people use to mask the pain, which are unhealthy coping skills. But when you're not dealing with the depression or able to acknowledge it, and a lot of people suffer in silence. I know at some point we'll talk about suicide, but the end result of unaddressed depression, or even there are people who have therapy and struggle with severe depression. Not everybody who commits suicide have avoided therapy. There are people who have been in the mental health system and they still unfortunately end it. But these are some of the experiences that they're having. And I'm going to highlight hopelessness and helplessness.
Okay. Thank you so much for sharing that. Gary, I'm going to come to you because I want to talk about this. One of a key word that Anitra said in this conversation is about loneliness. And I just want to read a question that was sent in to us. And it says, if my daughter, who is 9 years old, has anger issues and feelings of loneliness, is it okay to talk about this topic with her? What are your thoughts about that?
It's definitely okay to talk to her. I think that we have to know how to talk to kids. So the thing is that the way that I might address loneliness, depression with a 9-year-old might be a little bit different than I might discuss, say, with a 13 or 14-year-old. So the point I'm saying is that opening up lines of communication with our children, and really not just so much with our children, but anybody that we know, getting people to feel comfortable enough talking to you. I mean, that's really the thing I think that helps really deal with most of the issues that we're going through. So uh, part of that, the challenge for us, and I will say as a therapist, and I've had to speak with children 8, 9, 10 years old. Sometimes the challenge is that children don't want to talk. Sometimes they don't know what to say. So we need to be able to help them to talk, but we also need to be able to give them space to talk, be able to give them the space to develop their words, develop what it is that they want to say, to feel comfortable enough, to even begin to have a conversation. So everybody's not a therapist, So in terms of parents, yes, if you see something, if you see your child feeling lonely, yes, you should talk to your child is the best way you know. And if that's not working, then that's when you need to connect with someone, a therapist, someone that might be able to help your child then develop that voice that you're trying to get them to develop to take that to another level. So, without a doubt, if anytime your child expresses anything, you should talk to them or definitely have somebody talk to them.
I'm so glad you said that. And this is just the open discussion, a discussion
Mhm.
part that I want either any of you can answer this question, because I've experienced this a lot and I've seen this a lot. That a lot of times with children, when they're acting out, or or there's something they feel like, oh, nobody loves me, I don't fit in, or I don't want to be a part, or they want to start saying, you know what, I don't want to live, I don't want to do this. I've experienced this and seen this in kids 9, 10, 11, that feels like when they get in trouble or they're always being yelled at, or how do you speak to that, and how can you, as a parent, I'm not a parent, but I always want to know this, but how do you decipher through that, oh, he or she is just acting out versus this is a real issue that they are experiencing? Can we speak to that for a little while?
Well, I, if I can share, I think that the first thing I would say to parents is that, I mean, if you talk to your child, if you learn to talk to your child, you start to recognize whether or not this is acting out behavior. I mean, if it is acting out behavior, we need to figure out the reason why. What's happening? There's always a reason for the behavior. And excuse me, there's always a reason for the behavior. No behavior just pops up out the blue. So what is that child experiencing? What is that child going through? Excuse me, I'm sorry. Is there a way to help that child express themselves? So I think we have to go from the acting out behavior to what is actually happening. What's actually happening here?
Okay, Anitra, can you add to that,
And
please?
yeah, and I can chime in. So in my 13 years that I spent working in a school, my role was a school counselor, a school social worker. And I used to always say to parents, the kids that are acting out a lot, the kids that are in the principal's office, the kids that have been labeled, right? We put labels on kids and say my kid is bad. We have to stop doing that. Or because we're putting out in the atmosphere this expectation that they start to live up with. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy. A lot of the kids, when you sit down and talk to them, once you look past their behavior and actually say, hey, what's happening with you, right? How's everything going? I'm not going to address the fact that you threw the chair. I'm not going to address the fact that you keep getting sent out of your teacher's room. What's happening with you? Like, how was your weekend, right? Start asking questions and digging and asking. Children are honest. They will tell you. There's times where a kid will say, I don't like that I always get in trouble when other people do things. I get blamed for stuff, right? Other people do stuff and they don't get caught. But then when I do it, they say I started it, right? And when you listen to them, they're frustrated. And I'd say, okay, so tell me about that. Okay, well, let's problem solve. How can you let your teacher know that you're upset about this without doing whatever, right? It's problem solving. It's getting to the bottom of, let me stop focusing on what you're doing and figure out, well, what made you do that? So like Gary said, you have to ask questions. You have to be willing to listen. You have to empathize. You have to be able to understand that your children do have feelings. They get frustrated and angry. And a lot of times they don't know how to yet express them. They're immature. They're trying to figure it out. They're impulsive, right? They're children.
Mhm.
So in talking to them, okay, let's go back to class. What are we going to do? How can we handle this better? So I just think that we have to learn how to talk to our children, and like Gary said, not look at what they're doing, but start asking them questions.
Mhm.
When you ask the right questions, you will get answers. I promise you that. From kindergarten on up. If you
Right.
ask the right questions, but if you come at them yelling or just kind of addressing the behavior, they don't respond well to that.
That's right. And conflict resolution is like something that is just not a thing that we all deal with, well. And I want to go to Brandon because as a parent, I know that Brandon is a parent. And one of the things that we have talked about, I think mostly everybody on here is a parent, if I'm not mistaken. Um, One of the things that I think that Anitra said is important is that, talking to your children, treating them and respecting their feelings. And this was a question that actually came from a teenager who wrote in. So, Brenda, I want to ask you about this. I want you to give some insight to this. The question is, how do we approach our parents with a struggle if they don't believe in mental health? You.
I'm a back. Oh, okay. You can hear me now. Good. I didn't say anything of value. I was just getting into it. I'm gonna back up real quick, and then I'm gonna go forward with it. Um, a lot of that conversation that we have with our children is speaking with them and not at them. I think as parents, our tendency is to have such a great expectation because they're our kids, and that's what we put into them, and we know how we raised them. But it doesn't always translate that way because at the end of the day, they're their own people. And especially as they grow and develop, a lot of times we can get on the phone with our homie or get on the phone with your girlfriend and solve all of their problems. But then your children are suffering in silence in the background because you won't give them that same level set respect. Now, as far as the young person who has to really appeal to that parent, I think it's a matter of, once again, utilization of resources. A school counselor, maybe even a medical professional, somebody that they can reach out to who their parents might have an air of respect with, or even somebody clergy related who that child can appeal to, who might have the who won't have that same level of expectation from that young person, will hear them out and then be a go between, a voice in order to go ahead and advocate for that child as that parent comes to that place of understanding. I think traditionally, in some of our old school way of raising kids, there used to be this old adage that children are better seen and not heard. Oh, how abusive is that? To the point where we do have to listen to the voices of our young people, because if they won't, then somebody on the street or somewhere else in the world will, and then advise them improperly. So,
Good. I like that. Michelle, I want to come to you, and talk to you about from a student's perspective or children. How can students or kids improve their mental health? What are some things as a life coach that you see that they can possibly do to improve their mental health?
I believe some of the things that they can do are things that will build their self esteem. And that is including them in, they have like programs where there are groups of their peers. So peer coaching is good, group coaching, but they don't necessarily, it doesn't feel like they're in, some type of, but it can be something with their peers, introducing them to things that they really like to do, things that will really build their self-esteem. I know when my son was younger, I just wanted to have him involved so that he wouldn't, be doing anything, have idle time. So I put him in football and he cried every single day. And he did not want to play football. And I remember my mother was like, don't make the boy play football, but find something that they really love to do. Do they love art? What do they love to do? Ask them. As Anitra said, when we ask those questions, they'll tell us what they want to do. So things that will build their self-esteem, things that will make them feel important, that will make them feel a part of society, and it will really help them to be able to interact with others and to kind of pull them out of their shell.
I like that. I see a comment. Someone said great information. I see a comment here. It says, and as a child, it's sometimes hard to go to your parents because of the expectation, the fear of letting them down. Do anybody want to speak to that? That's open. Anyone can speak to that.
You
All
know,
right.
to add briefly, that is something that my daughter did share with me. She said that there was a lot of pressure on her to be great. Isn't that something?
Wow.
And we push them, you're going to go to college, you're going to get an education, you're going to do this and do that. And we never, or I won't say we never, but when we do ask them, what do you want to do? Go to college? Because they heard it on the phone. Yeah, girl, I know that right. She's gonna go to college. She's gonna do this, child. She's gonna be this, and she just like me. I just know she's gonna do the same thing I did. So now you go to them, and they're like, yeah, go to college. And so really, we really don't take the time to value where they are and what they want to do and what their dreams and goals are, and encourage them in that. Really listening to them.
Gary, go ahead. I know you wanted to say something about that.
Okay, Gary.
I think that a big piece of that are our parents. When parents learn how to listen and to tune into their children, and that's the key thing. Because I like what Brandon said earlier. Those of us of a certain generation, we didn't get that. We were told that this is what you do, this is how you do it. There was no flexibility at all in that. I grew up down south partially, and my grandmother lived right across the street from like a row of trees. And whenever I did something wrong, I had to walk across the street, pick my own switch, come back across that, hand her the switch, go in the room, lay down, wait for her to finish talking to her girlfriends, whatever, etc. My grandparents didn't feel the need. Now they loved me, and I think that's the key we got to keep in mind. Our parents, and a lot of our parents in these situations love their kids. It's not that they don't love their kids, but this is what they've been taught. This is how they've been taught to respond to their children. So the biggest challenge for parents that I see is we have to be able to listen. We got to be able to talk to our kids. We have to develop a way that our kids can feel comfortable talking to us. My daughter, when she was a teenager, and she's probably somewhere listening at this now, she would tell you that we had a great daughter. The biggest issue is that my daughter loved to talk. And sometimes her mouth would get her in trouble. But at the same time, my wife and I, what we wanted to do was to give her what our parents really didn't give us. We wanted her to be able to develop how to say it the right way, or say it in a positive manner. Because if she could learn how to say it in a positive manner right here at home, then getting out there in the community, interacting with your teachers, interacting with your police officers, interacting with other people in authority, which for us as people of color becomes very serious and very necessary to learn how to do. We felt comfortable that she would be okay, and she turned out pretty good.
Awesome. Anitra, I have a question that's here. It says, how can parents unlearn some of these learned behavior towards our children? You care to speak to that?
That's a great question. It really starts with just deciding that we want to see something different. If you think about what did all of the secrecy, not allowing our voice to be heard, like what did that produce in our own lives, right? 70% of the people that I talk to, it's a known fact that 70 to 75% of people who have extreme mental health issues, it starts in childhood. It goes back to the formative years. So we don't want to repeat the cycle. I think that if we want to see something different, we have to do something different. And so for me personally, as we said, we were told that children were seen and not heard. But that led to a lot of, conversations that I wish that I would have had, lessons that I wish that I had learned, not understanding. And so if we want our children to be more productive, more mentally healthy, to be understood that they are an entire person. Yes, they are. People used to say, well, what do you have to be stressed about? You don't have no bills, right? People just think that the only thing that you can be stressed about is finances. And I used to think what you got to be, all you got to do is go to school, get good grades,
That's
right? You don't have no problems. And I'm like, but my falling out with a friend in middle school is a big deal,
That's
right?
right.
So we minimize it. So if we want our children to be emotionally healthy, clear thought, better decision makers, understanding what sexual abuse is, all of the secrecy, we have to do something different. So, I think that it's really about how do we give our children, a greater foothold and a better health, right? The same way that people feed their children different foods because they have health problems that came from poor eating. We can see the products of not having good mental health in our families and the tough lessons that we have to learn. We have to want something different. I think that it just is just, that's the easiest answer I can say. If we want our kids to stand on our shoulders and go farther and become healthy, emotionally healthy, productive adults, it starts in childhood. So we have to be cognizant of that. That's why I always say to people, give your kids a strong foundation, because even when we look at celebrities, they tell you, when I was 7, when I was 8, I didn't have a childhood. So you have a chance to produce a productive citizen depending on what you decide to do with your voice and what you allow them to express.
Yeah.
And I'm
Brandon.
doing something different. I'm very different. I'm a very different parent than I would say 2 generations back, because I recognize that I need to do something different. And particularly because I'm a therapist, I understand this better from a variety of areas. So I do allow my daughter to have more of a voice than I think if grandma would see this, she'd be like, what? She said she's expressing herself, right?
Uh-huh.
So we got to do something different.
Yeah, Brandon, you want to add to that?
Yeah, one of the things that, or a scripture that I've been meditating on for the last 2 years, amongst a number of others, simply says that godliness with contentment is great gain. And I think as parents, sometimes we want our children to be successful, but we really have to look at our interpretation of what success is. Our youngest daughter has changed what she wants to be like 12 different times. I talked to her the other day. She said now she wants to possibly be a realtor and something else, where it started off as a veterinarian once. But what we've just been able to do along the way is just provide support to say that whatever you lend your hand to, as long as you are in Christ and you have a real and right relationship with him, you will be successful. I think parents, in order to kind of break that cycle, have to be content with where they are in life, so they don't try to live vicariously through their children and superimpose success on them.
Love.
I majored in political science because I said at a episode of the Cosby Show, I saw Claire Huxtable and said, I want to be an attorney.
Uh-huh.
And boy, oh boy, I appreciate my parents and keeping me on that track. But in my junior year, I said, I have no idea what I'm going to do with my life. So I tried to go to law school, and you see, that didn't work out. I'm not blaming them. I had a great childhood. I'm saying all of that groovy stuff. But at the same time, when we don't look at our children for their gifts and the uniqueness of who God created them to be and what they can offer to this world, then we really miss out on the greatest gift that God has given us to nurture and make great.
I love that. And this is a question, Michelle. I'm going to throw this question over to you. It says, can you advise what programs are available to help parents with learning how to speak to their children? Are there any, I know Michelle is a wonderful life coach. So listen, if that's the direction you want to go in, then we have wonderful therapists, spiritual advisors on here. But Michelle, any programs that you know, or anyone else, if you know any programs, feel free to share.
Actually, Anitra is the resource person for all of the programs for you. But definitely, I would say to contact your school, contact your local school. They will give you a list of resources and places where you can get that help. That's the first place I would go. There are some community programs that will be able to help, but I know just a list of resources. The first place I would say definitely is to contact your school.
Anitra, what are your thoughts about that?
Yes, I would agree with Michelle. In terms of specifically learning how to communicate, like you can get resources from your counselor's office. There's even times where you can get resources online. I mean, there's so many platforms. Google makes our life so simple. You can literally look up, Institute for Children or parenting classes. There's a lot. I would say parenting classes would be great for that. Even Googling local parenting classes, places like the YMCA, schools, community centers. There's even times where some of this information, if your church, I know some of our churches have resource centers where different people who do childcare work bring those type of things and put them like in the vestibule area. So those are some places that I would start. But Google is my best friend. There's 1,000 different organizations and programs, and we have like easy access to that. So don't be afraid to just put in information. Make sure it's from a reputable place though.
Yeah. And then the thing about Google, what I love is that there are people that really take time out to write reviews, read the reviews. Those are legitimate peers that are looking, that say, look, this was a great experience. They want to share with everybody else, or this was a horrible experience. Stay far away from it. So yeah, Google is definitely a great place to go. I want to shift the conversation a little bit, just a little bit. And I thank you so much for everyone that is tuning in. I saw the numbers going up and going down, but I thank you all for that are joining us. Today we have Brandon, Michelle, and Anita and Gary, who are really, really pushing this conversation on mental health awareness and the importance of it. Over the past month or so, we've seen some very prominent individuals publicly commit suicide. We had Regina King's son commit suicide. We had another actor that was in the show. I forgot the name of the show. I can't think of it. It'll come to me. The Walking Dead. In that show, we saw Miss USA, who was a part of a historical reign, where at one time we had three African American queens that were representing the United States, who was a lawyer, who was very high profile in all that she did, commit suicide. This thing has not only, and this was just in the month of January, this has been a very prominent thing that's been happening for many, many years. But over the last couple of months, we've seen it happen so frequently. I want to talk about suicide and the effect that it is having on our community and the relationship to mental health. Anitra, I'm going to start with you. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Sure. So suicide is definitely, as I mentioned before, it is definitely the end result of, for many people who struggle with depression. And when I say depression, I mean it's different, as Gary said, it's different types of depression, but definitely clinical depression, and who would just experience an ongoing experience of feeling helpless and hopeless. Going back to those two words, I think the scary thing, I know a lot of people have asked, how do you know, right? With the beauty pageant, beautiful young lady, lawyer, Regina King's son, how did we miss it? Like, how do you know? The hard part is that you can't look at someone and tell if they're depressed. She is in a prime example of that. Smiling, laughing, right? We can't judge a book by its cover. We don't know what's in someone's thoughts. We don't know how people really feel. I mean, people walk around with masks on all the time and suffer in silence. The one thing I will say about suicide is that it is, even as a mental health professional, I've had to assess people for suicide. I've had people sit in my office and express that they have thoughts. There's, going back to the word continuum, there's feeling like you don't want to be here, but not having a plan, right? And many, many people have felt like throwing in the towel on life, right? Suicidal thoughts are common, more common than we think. Mm-hmm. Depending on what's going on in life. Listen, I don't want to be here, right? Whether it's after a death or something traumatic, people struggle with that. But when you get to the point where you're making a plan, right, it's no longer a passive thought, it's an active thought. When people start making plans, and we have to feel comfortable, it's hard even for mental health. I used to be frightened of it in the beginning of my career, because what am I going to do? But the reality is that there's a lot that you can do to in some instances, asking the right questions, being comfortable saying, hey, do you have a plan? Like, when someone says it, it has to always be taken seriously. And I think sometimes we dismiss it. If somebody says, yeah, I feel like checking out, right. We gotta hear that, and an alarm has to go off to say, I need to be checking in, right? And then being comfortable asking the question. It's intimidated to say, well, do you really think, like, are you thinking about it, or like, do you have a plan? Like, tell me. It's intimidating, but we have to ask, because sometimes a person who's crying for help will tell you, like, I'm thinking about it. I've been thinking about it for a while. That's when you can kind of say, hey, I'm concerned about you. That either need to go to crisis, depending on, particularly they need to be in front of a mental health professional. That's not the going back and forth on the phone. It's a crisis. It's a 911. There's a suicide hotline. But then there's people who will tell you that sometimes they feel like giving up, but they're not going to do it. It's a slippery slope. I think minimally when we hear that, we need to take it serious. And for people who are struggling with the thought, it's definitely a sign that you are in emotional distress and that you need to get support, right? Just walking around feeling suicidal is not something that we want to become accustomed to. It's a sign that something is emotionally, you're not well, right? That's not a healthy mindset to embrace. So if you're watching this and a person feels that way, definitely. And I've told people that. I had this conversation with someone recently this week where I got on the phone with someone and they said, I don't have a plan. Not my client, just a random person that I was supporting. They did not have a plan, but they weren't in any counseling. They had no support. And so when they expressed to me everything that was happening, I said, listen, I'm glad that we talked about it and you don't have a plan. I don't want you to create a plan. So here's some resources. Here's some spaces that you can get counseling. This is what you need to do. But you have to ask the question. And I know that sometimes people don't want to do that, right? We don't want to ask. We think that if we ask the question, we're going to push the envelope or make them do it, but we're not. You can actually save a life just from asking a few questions and supporting that person to get more help. But it's never to be taken lightly.
Gary, what I want to ask you this, what are some things that people can do? And Anitra did touch on this, but I want to set like, I won't say a clear plan, but I want to set some things very clear that's like point A to point B to point C, that if a person is experienced, what Anitra talked about as far as knowing someone or having contact with someone, what is some clear steps that an individual can take to help that person, to help them to the best of their ability, if it's assistance or directing them to talk to someone? What are some clear steps that they can take to be a help to a person that's having the thoughts or maybe trying to conjure up a plan?
Dwayne, I think the first thing is to be able to talk, to get the person to talk. The more you can get a person to talk about what they're feeling at that moment. And then not just only at that moment, but at other moments they might have had. Because see, sometimes people might have been carrying this for a long time. So, being able to get people to feel comfortable enough to talk to you about what's happening, even if it's just for a moment. So sometimes people, I mean, I think sometimes, and even as we as clinicians, we think that we're going to get these great breakthroughs, in the therapy session, and we may not get that. But sometimes the whole idea is just planting that seed. So what I'm looking for is the individual to, one, hopefully tell me what they're feeling right there in that moment. What's going on? Are they upset? Are they mad? What losses have they had? I know part of when we do our assessments on individuals, we go back and we can look and see what a person's past was like. You- have they had, no, not only have they had these thoughts before, but were there other people in the family, mom, dad, that's had this behavior? So I think that the more, I know for me, the more that I know as a clinician, if I know that my client has that, not only is he having suicidal thoughts, but he's had a sister that tried to kill herself, or a mom or grandmom that did this, as I get that information, that helps me to prepare. So now when I'm seeing that person every session, maybe not every session, but quite a few sessions, I'm going to ask the question that Anitra is saying. It's a very hard question. It's an easy question, but it's a hard question to ask, because things appear to be going well. We don't want to spark anything, but the reality is that if a person is suicidal, and if they're actively suicidal, you don't have to. With the question that you ask is not going to spark anything. It's already there. So now the question is, what can we do to help gear that to where they can go see a therapist? If they're taking medications, they can go, see their psychiatrist and maybe have their medications altered. If there are some kind of support groups that they can get involved with, how can we help stir the conversation and dialogue in that direction? Because that's where you want to go at. I mean, that's where you want to be at. But I mean, and not to be long-winded, but I think that we just have to be able to have those type of conversations with our clients, but also other people, um, other people like our friends, our family, because I mean, there's other people around us, the neighbor, the person that you run in that's taking the carts from the parking lot of the supermarket and put it, everybody is going through something, and just being able to allow yourself to be there and just to listen, to
Mhm.
hear, and to offer some advice. So you want to steer people to a place where they can talk. Obviously, that's what I want to say. But I
Mhm.
think some people may not be ready to go there. So you got to keep the pipeline open until they're ready, hopefully ready to go there.
All right, and that's a really good point. I love that, and communication is key. And I definitely want to go to this question. And Brandon, I'm going to shoot this over to you to this statement. It says, "So many people don't want to feel like a burden, and talking and someone actually listen can save a life." Let's talk about, Brandon, the importance of having a confidant or having someone that you can talk to. Can you just touch on that a little bit?
Absolutely. I mean, that is of utmost value. One of the things that I found personally is, when you are surrounded by too many people, you have too many voices, you really can't make wholly informed and wise decisions at times because of all of the opinions.
Mhm.
But if you have some trusted advisors, people who have walked with you, people who share similar value systems, like precious faith, all of those things, and they really have a heart for you and they want to see you succeed, those are the kind of people that you can decompress to with rather speak to without judgment. I think that's one of the most critical things is the value of speaking to people who won't judge you for your downfalls. I think there's pressure societally, right? Especially with men, because we're an underserved group, to adhere to these roles, to get it right, to do all of these things. Going back a little bit in terms of just that suicide issue really quick, and here's one of the things that really stirred my passion was that the suicide rates among men, it's 3.69% or 3.69 times higher than it is with women. And 69.3% of the suicides, and these are statistics from 2019, not too far away. 69.3% of those suicides are by white males. So the thing and the commonality that you see there, you get a group of people who are just not talking. Guys are like islands sometimes. Hey man, how you doing? I'm cool. I'm cool. I got it together. And we don't interrelate like our female counterparts do. And it's so important that we get other men that we can confide in, other people that we can talk to really help us share those burdens and process through those things. Because, like Anitra has said, it is a continuum. It starts small. You're a dad. You have young children. You're trying to get it right. Bills fall behind. She gets mad at you. All of these things they pile up, and what we see is the numbers don't lie in terms of one of those disenfranchised and ignored groups in terms of men, specifically even white men who are just not okay because they're not talking. You got to have people in your corner and on your team in order to help you to get through the trials and the vicissitudes of life, as we say as preachers. So,
That's very, very true. I love where this conversation is going because I think that a lot of times, as you said, and I've heard people say, as sad as this is going to sound, but this is just the truth of the matter, is that we kind of, not we, but sometimes people kind of look at certain situations when it comes to suicide, that if a person didn't successfully do it, then that they were just acting out or they just were doing it for attention. I've heard this conversation say many times, that I've heard many people say this, that, oh, if they were not successful with doing it, and there are actual people that are suicide survivors, and one of the things that, we can look at it in many different ways. But I've heard people say this kind of thing, to where if they were not successful with it, that maybe they were just doing it as acting out or as attention. Anitra, can you speak to that, please?
Sure, I've heard that too, and it's definitely not understood, the severity of it. And I do think that there is the understanding of, why would a person do this. I had to spend a lot of time, even in young children. There's times that a student might reveal to me that they were struggling, and I call the parent, and the parent would want to discipline the child because it was perceived as they're just trying to get attention. They're acting out. We don't do that around here. We're spiritual people. They know better. Like, these are some of the responses that people would say. And I'd have to say, please, like, your child is expressing a concern and they are hurting, right? And kind of have to ask the child to come back, right? And they're like, don't call my parent, I'm going to get in trouble. And I think that mindset is not just towards children. I think it carries over into the adult world, where people judge it. They don't understand what makes a person get to that point. But it's not, when people are attempting it, they really wanted it to end. I mean, and we all say, okay, fortunately, their life did not end, the people who are looking at it. But for many of them, they're like, okay, many people struggle. I wasn't successful. I'm going to try it again. You have to be careful because they're at risk of trying it again. So this is where the interventions and the strategies and understanding what this means. And it's it's a lot of education that has to happen around, suicide and mental health, because people underestimate it, or they judge it, or they don't understand it. So they think that it's not real, or they respond more so in a harsh, judgmental way, instead of, with empathy and understanding that a person is not, when you're at that place, you're not thinking clearly, right?
Yeah.
Understanding that, when you understand that, then other things make more sense when you understand that.
Mhm. So I want to touch, and that was a good statement. I really think that gives a lot of insight on people not having to make comments like that, because first of all, it's ignorance. Just because a person was not successful in taking their lives does not mean that they were doing it for attention. It doesn't mean that. There are people that the plan just doesn't work. I don't know how many times I've tried to bake a cake. I just can't do it. I can't do it. I am not good at making a cake, but I can cook a mean pot of collard greens. But, one of the things I think that's important is that when we come to think about mental health and mental health awareness, that when we're shifting from suicide, and not everybody is attempting suicide, but when it comes to mental health, a lot of times I'm willing to say that a lot of people feel stuck. They feel like, I'm in this place, I don't know how to move forward. Michelle, I want to ask you, how can a person become unstuck? And if it may be trying to figure out a goal or a plan or financial, how can a person become unstuck?
Well, really it is helping them to see the truth about themselves. And the first thing that I would say is to find out how you got stuck in the first place. Like, that's the first thing, to understand, how did I get here? What happened? And those are some of the questions. And I'll share a personal incident with me when I actually planned my suicide. Wrote a note to my children, and this was the day. I struggled with sadness and loneliness and depression and hopelessness and helplessness and despair majority of my life, from as far back as I could remember. I always wanted to die. I hated my existence and I hid it very well. And one of the things that when I share with people now, they're saying, what? You know, in high school, and sometimes you could see it, but you really couldn't tell. And I was so stuck at a point. I purchased a home. I was, driving a nice car. I had a good job and I was doing all these things, but I was coming home and I was sleeping. And I remember my middle sister calling and she said, how do you sleep so much? I wish I could sleep like you. And we didn't know. That's why I am so excited about tonight's topic because my family didn't know. My oldest sister Patrice, she would call. Remember the answer machines where you can hear the voice? And so my sister Patrice, they knew me. I would have the blinds drawn. They would be outside of my house blowing a horn, knocking. I wouldn't answer, but they didn't know it was depression. They didn't know. And Patrice said on my answer machine, if you do not pick up, I'm coming over. And then my best friend called and said, your sister called and said she's on her way over. And I didn't want her to see me in the wreck I was in. So I picked up the phone and called her. Hey, I was just asleep. I've just been so tired. And she was like, well, I was on my way over. And this was the cycle of my life. I was happy around my family. One Thanksgiving, they were all here. And I was laughing and we had a good time. I just purchased my home. And when my sister left, she was the last person to leave. Right at my foyer, I closed the door, locked it, and fell into tears. And I cried. If she had came back to say I forgot my keys, she would have said, what in the world? But, I was really depressed and I was really going through a lot. But then as I began to be a part of a small women's group at a church, someone invited me and they began to ask different questions. It was a young women's group. And that was a way to help me to see myself. They asked the questions to bring awareness to who I was, some of the achievements that I had made, and asked the question, who are you? And I wanted to know who I was. And so I would say first, a person who is stuck is to talk to someone, a mental health professional, just to ask the question, I'm in this place. And they will ask the right correct questions, as Anitra said, to help see where you are and to help you to be able to come out of that place and to move forward. And it started for me with a positive mindset change because I saw myself through the lens of everything negative. So beginning to see the truth, it was coming out of a false mindset, a pessimistic, negative mindset, a catastrophic mindset, just the thoughts that were just destroying everything, my soul every day. So when those thoughts were reversed and I saw the truth about who I was, and it took time. And then I was able to see, and in addition to that mindset change, I will also add the lifestyle change that will help you to build that self-esteem and to feel better about yourself. And that's why I'm a purpose pusher, because I truly believe when you understand that your life is valuable and you understand, who you are and that you do have purpose and that you belong, then that will truly help to build your self-esteem and impact you to live. To live, your life matters. Your life matters.
Wow, I absolutely I have goosebumps. Because that is so powerful. And I think that what's missing in the world today a lot. And this is just my push whenever I am conversing with someone to make them feel that they are not alone. A lot of times that when people go through certain things, they feel like they are the only person that has ever experienced it, went through it, dealing with it. And I always encourage people that there's nothing that you can say or do that's going to make me say, what, you did that? No, there's nothing, because I get life and I understand that things happen. And I so love your transparency, Michelle. Thank you for sharing that. The people are in the comments. I'll share. I know you were talking. Someone said it's the brutal honesty for me. Sophia said, yes, Minister Primos, you are helping somebody. Thank you. Someone says, thank you for sharing your experience, and we overcome by sharing our testimony. So I'm so happy about that. Live, your life matters. Absolutely. That is important to always remember that. Gary, I want to come to you and ask you this question about coping mechanisms. It says, and this was a question that was submitted. It says, what are some tips for coping mechanisms when dealing with depression and or other mental health triggers?
So some of the coping mechanisms that I recommend, breathing exercises. And I think that sometimes people take breathing exercises for like that. When you say breathing exercises, people be like, "Oh, you want me to?" No, and some of that is some of that, but breathing is so much more. So when we breathe, for those moments that we're breathing, we're actually separating ourselves from the anxiety, from the depression. We're taking our minds off something else that we were thinking about, that we was heavily thinking about. And so hopefully we can take some of that and learn how to use it. I know like a lot of times what I do, especially with my people who have a lot of trauma, we do a lot of grounding exercises. We try to do exercises in which they are focusing on stuff that's in the room where they are. If we might focus on colors. We might focus on what the texture of the chair that they're sitting in. All of those things. The whole idea, once again, this up here runs wild. This right here takes you in a whole bunch of places. You will be, and if all of us are honest, all of us, I know I've been there where my mind is like totally been like, okay, what if this happens? What if that happens? And but none of that, when you check the reality based part of it, has actually ever happened. So grounding, so breathing and grounding helps us to sort of focus on what is actually happening in the moment. What are we doing in the moment? Where are we in the moment? What am I thinking? What am I feeling? Why am I thinking it? Why am I feeling it? I love what everyone else was saying. And if I could just also add that as a clinician, what I've learned to do is I had to humble myself, because a lot of times we clinicians get caught with our LCSWs, our MSWs, LPCs, whatever we got, and we forget that our chief mode is to help people. That's our chief mode. So when a person is coming, by the time Brandon or Michelle, or Anitra sends somebody to me, they don't want to hear about my degree. They don't want to hear me talk. What they want to do is see if there's a way I can connect with this bald head dude that's talking to them now. That's what they want. That's what they want to know. Okay. And so my thing is, I need to try to find a way to do just that, to open up a door so that maybe they can get to know me. Part of that is me sharing stuff, where it's relevant at. But the whole idea is doing whatever it takes, so mindfulness, all those type of things that we might do, cognitive behavioral therapy, to get people to see that they are bigger than the perceived problems. We have to get people to a place where they understand that there's more to them than what they perceive to be a problem. They're greater than what they can do. Now, on the outside, people think, oh, you're just talking huffy puffy stuff, but that's really not it. We really have to get people to believe in themselves. We have to get people to believe that there is a brighter side somewhere. We got it. That's what we have to do. And so I'm sorry, I ain't the preacher in the room, so I apologize. But anyway,
no, go ahead, because I'm going to shoot it over to the preacher as soon as you finish, because I know that he can really speak to this.
Yeah, and Brandon, I want you to do that. I just think that we have to be able to give people hope. They need to be able to see the hope, and we have to be able to do whatever it takes to build a relationship. We have to be able to form a relationship, be with them in the moment, so that they can get to other moments that are more pleasurable than where they're at right now.
Absolutely. Brandon, I'm going to shoot it over to you because I know that you have something to add to that.
Wow, I'm still stuck in Gary's tractor beam there. That was some good stuff. And I'm still cogitating on what Michelle said. That oh wow. Um, one of the most repeated biblical phrases that God implores us through over and over again is fear not. And he tells us over and over and over again, it's the most repeated phrase in the Bible: fear not, for I am with you. And the Word of God simply says, God has not given you a spirit of fear. Other translations say timidity, but of love, power, and of sound mind. And knowing that allows an individual, from a spiritual perspective, to not just understand that God is always with them, but to understand that they have the authority to be in control based on what God has granted them as a gift of sanity in the midst of it all. I'm so glad that Gary talked about the breathing, because when my wife first introduced it to me, I was like, man, come on, But I found that, sometimes you can be concentrating and working so hard and doing so many things that you're just taking shallow breaths. And there's an app out there or something that the commercial comes on and it says, be still and do nothing for 30 seconds. I love that thing. I stop like my puppy when that thing comes on. I might have the phone up or something. I see it out the corner of my eye. I'll be like,
I'm with you. I agree with you.
oh man, it's such a relief to be able to just stop all of the traffic, the commotion coming off of social media, turning off the TV, just tuning it all down, because there's so many inputs coming into our personhood and into our being that it crowds out the essential beauty of what it is to be God's creation. I was talking to a family member the other day and just really talking about some of the things that I do to decompress. And one of my chief things that I do is ride bikes. I love being out there. I can get out there for 60, 70, 100 miles and talk to God the entire time, worship the entire time, witness his beauty, his creation, because what, right? He put all of this here for us, to see the colors, to smell the smells, to really be able to enjoy the beauty of what life is. Like Michelle said that, your life matters. And when you take that time to discover God and discover the beauty of what he's done for you every single day, it's a powerful thing. It really is.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Aditra, it looks like you have something to add to that.
I'm shaking my head because going back to what Gary said, I think that as human beings, we don't realize the amount of stress, that we're all under. And I'm like, yeah, I do breathing, I take walks, I'm shaking my head, exercise, and you know, the helpers have to take time out. Somebody said in the chat, you got to check on a strong one. Sometimes people don't necessarily see you as human because you do this work. And I'm constantly having to remind myself why I need to be prayerful, why I spend so much time talking to God and, searching the scriptures and worshiping, because I never know, we don't know when our phone is going to ring. And we, obviously, when you're in this field, it's a call. And I do this because I believe that this is what God wants me to do. However, I have to practice the things that I teach my clients. I do practice self-care. Everything, if I say, hey, you got to relax and breathe, I'm doing those things as well, because we're subject to all of the things that everyone else. And as Michelle said, I mean, we all have experience. We have our own fair share of things. I lead grieving with hope, and I'm on grief journeys. I talk about that. I share that. I self-disclose because I do want people to see me as human. People want to know, they don't want to see you. You want to be a therapist. You want to be touchable. You want to be relatable. However, like Gary said, you have to know that you're in that space to listen more than share. But there's times that I tell people things and they're like, what? And it's like, oh yeah, I lost my dad and I felt just like you did right now. Mm-hmm. It feels dark, but the light is coming, right? So I'm able to tell people, yes, I've been here. I've done that. I'm not telling you what I learned out of textbooks. A lot of this stuff is experiential. I'm not telling you this because I learned this on page 9 in graduate school. This is something that I've lived. So this is just a good conversation. I'm shaking my head because I'm agreeing with everything that everyone is saying.
That's awesome. And this is so God, because this is the way that I wanted to shift the conversation next to talk about grief. I know that we've been on here, and I want to thank everybody for watching. Thank you guys so sticking around. If you guys are okay, and we can stick around just for a little while longer, because there's an important topic that I want to talk about that we haven't really touched on or dug deep on, because this is something that a lot of people, I'm not gonna say everyone, a lot of people have experienced this over the last 2 years, is grief. That there's been a lot of death and there's been a lot of loss. And Anitra, I know that you have a company that specializes in grief. Can you just talk about that? And I want to stay right here for a little while to just talk about grief, because I know there's a lot of viewers that have lost loved ones over the last few months, or last 2 years per se, or years ago, but definitely over the last 2 years because of what has happened in the world. But let's talk about, grief in this relationship to mental health. Can we touch on that?
Sure. One of the things that I always start out with telling people is that grief is a journey. And I say that because it is certainly a long-term. Grief is forever. So let me start by saying that there is not a time limit on it. And also, one of the things that I think the pandemic did was shed a light on the fact that grief is not just about death, it's about losses. And we all have lost something in this pandemic. Mm-hmm. So there are people who are grieving because they lost relationships. They have physically lost people to death. They have lost their jobs. They have lost their savings. They have lost their sense of security and safety. So there's a lot of grief about a lot of things. I want to direct my attention, though, to the death. We have experienced an unbelievable amount of loss. And one of the things that I explain to people is that grief is overwhelming. You can never prepare for it, for death. I don't care if somebody is on hospice and you're told that they have 90 days, right? When you get the phone call that has happened, your mind is like, what? We can't prepare for it. And a lot of people are in bereavement overload. One of the things that we talk a lot about is understanding the stages of grief. And, just to kind of run through them, there is, of course, the shock, and there's the denial, and there's the anger, and then there's the depression, and then there's the bargaining, and then you get to the acceptance phase. These are stages. It doesn't go in a neat, fancy order. It looks like a roller coaster ride, right? So you can go from shock to anger to bargaining, back to shock, and you can stay in shock for a long time. And the main things that I want to say about grief is that it's not a time limit. I think that there's a lot of people who think, oh, this person's been gone for a year, you should have moved on. Mm-hmm. I just had this conversation this week that the love that you have for a person never ends. Therefore, neither does grief. It does not end. Grief is forever. What changes is the intensity of the grief and how you're experiencing it. When you've learned how to live without a person for 19 years, I don't feel the same intensity of the loss. I'm able to laugh when I think about my grandmother now versus when I got the phone call 19 years ago, but I'm still grieving. I still feel her absence. I still feel her loss. So I think that there's an unrealistic expectation in society in general about what it looks like. And yes, people are coming back to work, and they're showing up back to work. Because you smile does not mean you're not grieving anymore. Because you can function at work, it doesn't mean you're not grieving. And so it becomes this invisible cross to bear. And a lot of times people feel very much forgotten about. So I always say, check on people. The crowd is thick when it first happens. But then the interesting part is that about a month into your loss, when the shock is wearing off and the reality is setting in, that's when everybody's like disappear. And it's not that they mean to do it, but people think, hey, it's been a month, right? But the reality is that the grief is really just setting in a month, right? The funeral is over, all of the hustle and bustle. So you have to check on people repeatedly. It's 6 months in, 9 months in. Hey, how you doing? I know it's your first birthday without your dad. I know, right? Consistently checking in, because I do think that people have in their mindset that something magical happens after it's been a year. And that is not the reality. It's really just starting. And so, and just, things that we say, spiritual things that we say, grief is natural and spiritual. So, and I can know that the Pringles can attest to this. I am a Christian, and I do know the scripture that says to be absent from the body is to be present with the Lord. But I also know that we don't want folks in heaven. We would rather them be here. That's just a real
Mm-hmm.
reality for most of us, unless they were suffering. We struggle with that. And I tell people it's not a lack of faith because you're grieving. It doesn't mean that you don't love God. It doesn't mean you don't trust him. And yes, people are angry with God. We have to be able to be honest and say, I don't understand. I don't understand why this person got healed from cancer. And people have questions, and God can handle our anger. I'm always like, people been angry with God since the Bible days. Matter of fact, it ain't many people in the scriptures who didn't have some questions for God. Some of those questions get answered, some of them are not. But I do think that people who are spiritual, I've heard people say people over spiritualize death, and they don't speak to the fact that this is a natural reality. It's hard, it's emotionally distressing, and that
Mm-hmm.
it's okay to say that you're sad and not feel like you have to put on a face and say, oh, well, they with the Lord and I'm just happy. And the day that they went home, I saw the angels and Gabriel, and I would rather them not come back. I'm ready. Right. That's not our stories. That's not
Yeah.
most of our stories. Right. We understand that it's spiritual, but there's a natural. So I just say to people, it's not a lack of faith to be on a grief journey. I have had a lot of people tell me that they get angry when people say, oh, God needed an angel. And it's like, that's not even biblical. No, he don't. He got all the angels that he needed. That's not,
Right.
we say
That's
things,
right.
and it makes people feel, and then they're like, okay, well, you want to volunteer your child? You're telling me that my child died because God needed an angel. Okay, let's see if you want your child to become an angel, right? And then all of a sudden people are like, oh, I'm sorry, that really probably wasn't the right thing to say. Um, our job when people are grieving, and I'm in with this, is not to make them feel better. It's to sit in a discomfort and uncomfortableness of their pain and just be present, right? It's not anything that you can say. People say, I don't know what to say. And it's like, don't say anything. Just show up. Just
Mm-hmm.
bring groceries. Just pay for somebody to clean the house. Just take their kids for the weekend. Take their pet for the weekend. It's not about the words. It's about saying, I know that you're going through a challenging time and I want to support you. Don't ask them what they need because they're not going to be able to tell you.
Yeah.
Grief back discombobulates your mind. They have 100 people saying, if you need anything, tell me. They need stuff,
Yeah.
right? They need a lot of stuff. So think about what you can do and just offer your time instead of asking. And I know I said a mouthful, but
No, but I think you really just helped a whole bunch of people, including myself. And I think that one of the things that I don't really talk about a whole lot, I've shared it, but I don't really talk about it a lot, is that I lost my sister, my baby sister. And that was a time I've been around people and they've passed away, but this was a different type of hurt. Um, and it was a shock. I know that all of her life she had sickle cell, and so it wasn't a thing of that I don't even really know how to say it, but it wasn't like due to the pandemic, or it wasn't. I meant through the to the virus or things like that. She had sickle cell and she had a crisis that she just couldn't bounce back from, and that was such a shock to me. And I can't tell you. And then I saw someone put in the comment, and as you said, someone said, check on your strong friends. People that know me know that I'm a pretty tough person when it comes to reality or dealing with things. But I can't tell you how many days I've sat in my house and cried all by myself. And then when the phone would ring because somebody needed something, they would ask, how are you doing? But it wasn't because they were actually asking how I'm doing. The next question was, I need you to do such and such. And I think that people lose sight of that the moment that I'm sitting in my house crying and I have to wipe my tears and, and begin to talk to people to help them with their need. I think a lot of people really lose sight of how long this process can take, or how the process never ends. And Anitra, I can so agree with that. Like when I was thinking about her death, and as spiritual as I am, and as much as I'm into church, the weird thought would come to my mind, even in myself, of like, I know that she is in the ground. I think we lost Anitra, but hopefully she'll be back. I know that she's in the ground, but I'm like, is she okay? I'm like, what are you thinking? There's so many different thoughts that come to your mind. And then I think a lot of times that we've just been trained to say, that she's with the Lord or whatever the case may be. But that's not, I really don't want to hear that in that moment. You know what I mean? I don't want to hear that. Sometimes I just want to be able to deal with what I'm dealing with and go from there. So I totally understand what Anitra was sharing with that. So anyone else want to share and talk about that? Anybody want to add to that? Okay, Brandon, feel free.
I'll just speak briefly. It hasn't even been 2 years since I lost my son and my father. And, I praise God for, my wife who has been here with me because, as a minister, one of the most difficult places of ministry for me was with individuals who were dealing with grief and the bereaved, because it was like Anitra said, it was so uncomfortable to just sit there in the silence of it. And I never knew how to respond to it until I lost people close to me myself.
Mhm.
And nobody's ever going to be as sufficient as God can be in those moments of comfort. But I think it's so important that, you know, we recognize that it's a scary thing for people, and it's up to you. If you want to let people off the hook, it probably will save and preserve your life. But if you want to charge it to them, you can do that as well, but it probably won't get you anywhere. But one of the things that I found is that people just didn't know what to say. So, they just scattered to the nether hills and just were not heard from during that time. And I had people after the fact admit to me that, because of the proximity of relationships and the timing of it, losing them 5 months apart like that, they just didn't know how to be. And like Anitra said, and like you said, Dwayne, it's like, you know what? Just lend yourself to that person at that time and at that moment. Can you just not be everything to them and just be enough? Just be a presence. Just sit there and be. And I praise God because my wife was all of that and more for me during that period of time. And even though I knew what I knew biblically, it still doesn't stop you from crying. I can still smell my son. I
Mhm.
can still hear his voice at times. None of those things stop, in the midst of it all. And I can't biblically dismiss them because God wouldn't even want me to. He
Mhm.
created me with emotions to feel and to experience this, but to also invite him into it so that I'm not so overwhelmed by it
Wow.
as to then go into a place of misery and despair. And the Holy Spirit has really informed me because this is, I lost other relatives. They were older and seemingly was their time, if you will. But to lose your 20-year-old boy, he's
Yeah.
he's still a baby in here. I still see him in the crib in my mind at times. So, and even this, I allow myself to still cry, and we have to give ourselves permission
Yes.
um, to cry and to feel, because two of the words that I hate most as applied to manhood are man up. Because man up says, don't cry, suck it up, take your emotions, fold them away. And no, don't tell me to man up. Ask me if I'm okay. Is there anything that, I can do? And, let me be human. Let me be human in the midst of it all.
Yeah, I think that's important because, like I said, like there's been many times I can't tell you how many times I've picked up the phone to call my sister. Like I can't tell you, just not even thinking. Like I'm just like, oh, something exciting happened. Let me call Ashley and tell her about it. And then it hits me like, oh wait, she's not here. I can't do that. So then you feel these emotions that are coming back over you. They start to take over you again. It's like, who, when do I get over this? Like, when do it? And Anitra, I'm so glad that you shared. And I am fighting back every tear with inside of me right now. But it's one of the things that I'm so grateful that you shared, that there's no time limit. And I think that a lot of times people feel that they have to put a time limit
Mm-hmm.
on the suffering and the pain, but there's no time limit. And I absolutely hate when people start to do that because it takes away the moments that you have. And then you feel like you have to suppress all of these feelings and things, and you never really deal with it. And then at the most inopportune time, that's when these things start to come up. So Anitra, thank you so much for really,
You're
really touching
welcome.
on it. I so appreciate that because I want people to know I don't care how spiritual you are, you have to be able to deal with this, and you can talk about it, and it's okay. It doesn't take away from your relationship with God. It doesn't take away from that he's still almighty. It doesn't take away any of that. The only thing that is identified is that you are a human and you are being in this moment. That's the only thing that happens.
And can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I had a little technical difficulties. And I always say to people, imagine the fact that Jesus cried when Lazarus died. And he knew he was going to, he raised them back from the dead, but there is a moment where it says Jesus wept, right? So it is definitely the humanity of Jesus was sad that his friend died. The spiritual side raised them up. So I say to people, we can't feel bad when we are emotional, like God gave us emotions, and it's okay to feel, because that is something that I do think that people want to rush your experiences. And, I love the whole say their name. We should be able to say our children's names. We should be able to say our loved ones' names. We shouldn't have to act like they never existed or just hush the conversation. And people are intimidated to ask how you're doing. A lot of people have said, I don't want to ask how a person is feeling because they don't know if that's going to trigger you. And I'm like, I promise you that they're grieving, right? You're not going to hurt them by going into their office and knocking on the door and saying, hey, I know that you had a loss. I'm just checking in on you today. I promise you, if anything, people feel ignored. They feel like people are not asking or checking in. You're not going to make a grieving person sad by asking them how they're doing. You're acknowledging the fact that they had a loss. And I appreciate it when I came back to work. I would have people peeking in and they're doing this dance. And it's like, do I say something to her? And I would just say, come in. Like, how are you? Like, I just wanted to see how you're doing. And I'm like, well, thanks for asking. Or can I give you a hug? This was pre-pandemic time. I miss my hugs.
Right.
One of my coworkers said, can I come in and give you a hug? I'm just really upset about your dad dying. And I say, thank you for asking. Of course, I didn't cry in front of him, but I cried after he left because I thought that was so considerate and sweet. And he's like, I lost a parent. I know how this feels. I just am concerned and I'm praying for you. And I said, thank you so much. So, let's not avoid people like the plague because we don't know how to engage with them. Just say, hey, I'm thinking about you, right? Because they're grieving.
I so agree with you, Anitra. When Brandon and I went through what we went through with losing Sam, and a friend of mine, she's a therapist, and she called just as sweet, just to check on us. And she said, how are you? I know you have so many people just calling and coming by. I was like, no, we sit here crying by ourselves. We were on the couch, just on each other, like, it's gonna be okay. It's gonna be all right. And she said, they ran away from you, didn't they? I said, yes, but she shed light on it. And she said, people don't know what to do, so they run. They don't know what to say. Brandon lost his son, oh my goodness. So people ran. That same month, Brandon and I was on Anitra's Grieving with Hope, their Zoom call that they do every month, I believe, Anitra. And we got on, and one of the girls that partners with Anitra, she said that she had a note by her nightstand, I believe she said, and she said it said to forgive people. And she said she had to learn to forgive people for the things that they were saying. They just didn't know what to say, for not being there. That was a turning point for us. And we learned a lot. And so we understood to forgive people. People just don't know what to do. And they are devastated that you are devastated. Mm-hmm. And so we've learned to just, when they do call, if they ever call, we just love on them, and encourage them and let them know it's okay. We do want to talk about it. We want you to love on us. So that is very true, Anitra. And thank you for all you do, Anitra. I just love her.
Thank you too. Thank you too, Michelle. And I love you as well. And your husband, y'all a power couple. I always tell you that.
Oh yes.
And Gary is doing his thing too. This is just this is a rich conversation. I'm so glad that you did this, Dwayne.
Thank you. I'm just so grateful to have all of you tonight. And I did not expect us to go this long, but the people are hanging with us. They are hanging with us, and I'm so grateful for that. But we are going to start rounding it up because it is going on to the 9 o'clock hour, and I do want to give some time and some room for you all to share all that you have going on, how people can contact you, if you don't mind that. Just share some things about your business, give some insightful words before we close out, and I'm going to do some final thoughts. But I'm going to start with Brandon. I just want you just to share any final thoughts. If people want to contact you, email you, talk about your businesses. Everybody, I want you to share and really promote what you do, because we need to make sure that people can get in contact with you all to get the help and support that they need. Brandon, I'll start with you.
Thank you so much. Unlike my counterparts here, I don't necessarily have anything professionally going on as far as, coaching or mental health services, but I'm an associate minister at the Temple of Prayer Church at Third and Central in the city of Chester. You can reach me at bhprimo@yahoo.com, or just look me up on Facebook, as simple as it is. I have a completely different, skill set professionally, and then of course vocationally, bivocationally as a preacher and teacher. But once again, I get a lot of calls, from men, sometimes from wives who want their husbands to talk to me about, different things. But I'm available. I'm doing some mentoring right now of, a couple young people, and some other great things going on. But if you're a brother and you need somebody to talk to, you need a shoulder to lean on, somebody to confide in, I'm here for you. I really, really, really want men to win, because I gave those statistics earlier, but I've seen them flesh out. And I really want to make sure that men, especially men who are dealing with divorce, because I went through that myself, and some of the pain and the toil of that. If you're dealing with any of those things, please reach out to me. If you just need a shoulder to cry on, I'm here in that capacity. So I appreciate being a part of this panel. I've learned a lot this evening. Thank you so much, Brother Wiggins, for this time, and I appreciate you guys.
Thank you so much for being a part, Brandon. He is definitely my big brother. I'm so excited that he's a part of the panel tonight. I'm going to shoot it over to his wife, my sister, Michelle.
Good evening, everyone. Again, Dwayne, this was powerful. This was, I believe, life-changing for many. And this knowledge is really power. My name is Michelle Primo, and I am a certified life coach, and I do life coaching. You Belong Life Coaching Services is my company. And what I will do is I will come alongside you, and I will help you at that place right where you are. And if the road is tougher than what I can do, then I'll shoot you over to my girl Anitra. But I am here to help you to know who you are. And it is a Christian coaching company. I truly believe that we are human beings. And I do believe that we are limited in all of our abilities, all of our mental and physical strength. And I do believe that God is our divine power and our source of strength. I do believe in that. So I will encourage you in your spiritual growth and development, your personal growth and development. And I am also the author of the High Powered Woman, the High Powered Woman. So if you have not gotten the book, I encourage you to get the book, and it will really empower you on your journey as a woman. And you can find it on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Walmart.com. You can email me at what is my email? The High Powered Woman at gmail.com. I have about 5 different emails. Also, You Belong Life Coach at gmail.com. And I am also a minister as well at the Temple of Prayer Church along with my husband. And I'm also a Bible teacher as well. Again, thank you all. Gary, it's so good to know another therapist that we can refer people to. It is truly a blessing to be on the panel with you, Anitra and Dwayne Wiggins. You are amazing. And I just want to tell each and every one of you that your life really does matter. And guess what? You are enough. Chelsea, Chris, I've followed a lot about her life after her suicide. And one of the things that she said was, turning 30 feels like a cold reminder that I am running out of time to matter in society's eyes, and it is infuriating. And this is really pervasive in the minds of so many people, that they do not matter, that they're running out of time. And I just want to encourage you to know that you are enough, and that you do matter, and that you are successful in your own right, in your own right, not what society says, but in your own right. So I just want to thank you all. I love you all. I thank you all for tuning in. And again, Dwayne, I love you and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Michelle. And this gentleman that I had the opportunity to meet, that was referred to me from Anitra, Gary, please, please, please come on and tell the people how they can get in contact with you.
Well, my name is Gary, as you guys already know. I can be reached through my private practice, which is Surviving Today LLC. My website, www.survivingtodayllc.com. My telephone number is 215-278-9567. I am a therapist by day. I work for an agency called Resources for Human Development. I also, as you know, I have my own private practice. I teach as an adjunct professor at Delaware County Community College. I am more so even that. Other than that, I'm a husband, I'm a father, and I'm a grandfather. And for me, um, short of being a child of God, that right there, those three things are the most important thing to me, because they have helped shape my life, where I've gone at, where I'm going. So I'm just grateful for that. I've never ever thought of myself as, well, I'm not a preacher, I'm not a minister, but I've always felt that the Lord gave me an ability to teach and to be a part of that part of the healing for people. Um, I specifically love working with men. What I'm finding a lot of times in that community is, Dwayne and Brandon, Michelle, and each is all found, is that a lot of times brothers, we don't talk. We're told not to talk, but it's not like someone is telling us not to talk. It's society, the culture around us tells us that we're not supposed to talk. We're not supposed to talk about how I feel. I'm not supposed to cry. I'm not supposed to do any of those things. And what I'm learning, and what I've learned, and just from my own personal experience, is that that stuff right there can literally make you sick. It can hurt you. It can kill you. I also work with an agency, a group of men called Black Men Heal, and once again, trying to encourage men to just talk. I don't care who you talk to someone you trust, but get it out. I mean, this is a need. And I'm thankful for the ability to be in this company. I only knew one person prior to this. Now I know three more people, and I'm looking forward to more collaboration and just being able to be a part of the conversation that we're having right here at this moment. So thank you. Thank you, guys.
All right. Thank you so much, Gary, for being a part, and I'm so grateful. Listen, I hope that we can do round two sooner than later, but
Yeah.
but I have to give a shout out before I come to Anitra. I have to give a shout out to my sis, my big sister. Although I always call her my big little sister, because sometimes I act a little bit older than her. Patrice Todd. If you're watching, that's Michelle's sister. She is my big sister, my confidant, my friend, my she means the world to me, and she is the one that connected me to Anitra. And so I'm so grateful for Patrice. She really, really means a lot to me. So I have to turn it over to Anitra, who, I'm telling you, Anitra, I can feel your presence through social media. Like, I can feel. I said to my sister, I said, this lady Anitra, I feel like she's like my biggest cheerleader, and we've only known each other for like 2 days. I'm like, she's on top of it, she's responding, she's suggesting, and I'm like, I said, Anitra, I need someone. Do you know any guys or something? I promise, before I can even get it out, I felt like she sent back Gary. I'm like, she is on it. She is I want to almost like give her the title of Mrs. Resource, because she has the hook up, the connections. Anitra, please tell the people all about who you are, your different businesses, and how you are impacting the world.
Yes, I want to give a shout out to Patrice Todd as well. That's my girl. We served in the same school community for a decade, and I'm telling you, when she left, I was heartbroken. And now I'm no longer there, but we're forever bonded. And of course, Michelle is my classmate, so it's a small world. I'm grateful to be here. So I am Anitra. I'm the owner of. Let me start with Grieving with Hope. That was my first baby. Grieving with Hope was birthed out of my own experiences of going through multiple losses and realizing that grief is such an overwhelming experience, and just knowing what I needed. I promised God that if I got through my grief journey and pit and I got out, that I would serve people. Never set out specifically for grief, but I actually had a dream. God gave me a vision of me praying for grieving people, and it was amazing. And I knew that when he showed me that, he wanted me to start doing something more for grieving people. I always say that God gave me the ministry of comfort. As a believer, he gives us all gifts. And so out of that, Grieving with Hope was birthed in 2017. I have an annual conference and a monthly Zoom, and we talk about all things grief. Grieving with Hope Facebook page is called Grieving with Hope with Anitra and Janelle, who was one of my closest friends. We do this together now. I'm so happy that she's partnered. And so if you check out our Facebook page, you can find out all kinds of grief resources. Yes, I have been called the resource queen. People even call me and say, hey, I need to buy a house. Can you help me? And I'm like, yeah, let me get you on the phone. If you call me, I'm going to help you. But if you need help with grief, you can go to Grieving with Hope with Anitra and Janelle. You can find out about our monthly Zoom. It's the first Sunday of every month. March the 6th is our next one. My second baby, Taylor Made, and my maiden name is Taylor. So my business is personal. Our mantra is we tailor our services to fit your specific needs. I provide counseling and training. I specialize in grief and loss. I treat depression, anxiety, life transition, stress, and anxiety. But again, grief and loss is a lot of what people are directed. That is my area of specialization. And I also do training. So I just unveiled, if you're an organization who needs support in training people, I train therapists, clergy, chaplains, hospital, anybody who works with grieving people. Or if you're an employer and you've had loss in the workplace and you need to have a Zoom or just process with your staff, I provide those sort of non-traditional professional grief services. My website is www.tailormadebhs.com. My phone number to the business is 484-840-3354. And if I am booked right now, and I'm not accepting new clients, but I promise you, if you call me, I will find you a therapist. I will give you a list of different spaces. If I can't help you, I promise you that I will direct you to someone else who can. That's my commitment to people. It's not just about me and my practice, but if you need support, I will give you resources. And Gary, I want to thank Gary personally for coming, because as soon as he said it, I was like, well, let me call Gary. I've been calling Gary a couple times about things, and I just appreciate him, as a unicorn in the therapy world, as an African-American male therapist. I only know 3 of y'all personally. So Gary, I'm going to be blowing you up.
I'm here to help. Just where to reach me at. Not a problem.
And I just want to say my final words is, for people watching, that your mental health matters. And also that grief is a journey. So I really hope that people understand that it's okay to not be okay. You don't have to suffer in silence. There is so much help available. And I'm going to go back in the chat and put some platforms, therapy for Black girls, clinicians of color, Black, brown, Delaware therapists. I'm big on giving out resources, because people need to know when this conversation ends, if they want therapy, where can they go? So I will make sure to put those resources, the suicide hotline, all of that kind of stuff. I'll come back and put it in the chat. so that people can know where to go. And I do hope that people hear this and are they've learned something and just understand that it's okay and that your mental health matters. Our health and our physical health and our mental health are tied together, and there are many people who are sick because of emotional reasons. And you deserve to live a high quality life and be happy and content. That's God's plan for your life. And there are people out here who can help you get there. And I'm going to end on that. Thank you, Dwayne, for hosting this. This was amazing.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you again so much to each of you for coming to be a part of it. Like I said, I hope this is something that we can do. Again, I've created this YouTube channel through my company, a human dot being explanation point. Because the truth of the matter is that we're all human. And so we all need to be treated with the level of respect, but we are also all being and being whatever, we've been called to be. That's what we're doing in life. And that's the important aspect. And once we start respecting that, then we can have such a better world. And as it says, it's okay not to be okay. It's okay not to be okay. So again, thank you so much to each of you who have come on tonight, Brandon, Michelle, Anitra, and Gary. I really sincerely thank you. And thank you to all who were watching tonight. We do have a scroll that goes across the bottom that will have some numbers on there for you to call. And we placed it earlier. We have the National Suicide Prevention and Mental Health Hotline. So you can go on there if that's going to be scrolling off at the bottom right there for you. But I'm so grateful again. Thank you all so much. I'm going to do my final thank yous and my final thoughts. But again, to the panelists, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I really sincerely appreciate you.
Thank you.
Until next time. Again, I want to say thank you to everyone who tuned in tonight. Thank you to every single person that viewed, that shared, that posted. Again, we do have those numbers going across the bottom, so that if you need to get in contact with someone, please do not hesitate to do that. And as Anitra said, that she will also put some stuff in the chat, and I'll make sure that we get the information that you need. Make sure that you get Brandon's information, Michelle and Gary's and Anitra, so that you can have it, so that you can get in contact with individuals if you need to. I just want to do some thanks to a few people. I have to give a special shout out to my producing partner, Sophia Christina Stokes, who's on with me tonight, just who really, helped push this vision that I had. And she's really helping me push the YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube, I do ask that you subscribe. It's A Human Being. And on that YouTube channel, what I've been led to do is really create a platform that focuses on mental health and do different things that's going to bring, as most of you know, that I'm a writer as well. So I want to create sitcoms and short films and all of that stuff to kind of like put on that channel so that people can be entertained. What I do know is that we are in a time where we just need to laugh a little bit more, feel love. And so this platform is huge for encouragement. So if you are looking to be encouraged through, I want to work on a documentary. There's so many different things that I'm going to do with this platform, other than host these panel discussions, that if you subscribe to that, I promise to produce content for you that will be edifying and uplifting to your body and to your mind and spirit. So thank you all. And thanks to my producing partner, Sophia, for being a major part of making this happen. I also want to, again, thank the viewers. You guys have really encouraged me so much to really keep pushing this conversation. And again, thank you to the guests who have joined me on tonight. You guys, if you want to see more, let me know. We can definitely produce more. If you want to see more, definitely let me know, because I want to continue to push this conversation. We covered a whole lot tonight, and I know that there's still a lot more that we need to cover. In my final thoughts, checking in on your mental health starts with really evaluating your feelings and how you're feeling, from anxiety to loneliness to frustration to grief. It's safe to say so many people have faced a wide range of emotions throughout this pandemic and just in the times that we're in. Across the globe, people have been isolated from loved ones, concerned about their safety, and bombarded with bad news day in and day out, with all the killings and everything that's been happening. Make checking on your mental health a routine. I'm going to really encourage you to do that. Make checking in on your mental health a part of your routine. It takes time to form a habit. At first, purposely asking yourself questions about your mental health might feel strange, but over time, it will become a natural part of your routine if you allow it. The times that we are living in has and will continue to put many people through extra stress. Being proactive in monitoring your mental health, you can ensure you stay happy, healthy, and prepared to take on anything life throws your way. Until next time, remember, you are driven, vital, and whole. You are a human being. Have a good night, everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. Talk to you soon. Bye.